We're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thrive, Not Survive by Field Conspiracy and Catalyst Music Berlin. My name is Paula. The slides, sorry. My name is Paula. And I'm a music producer, artist, activist, and the founder of a cooperative label called Field Conspiracy. And the reason I'm here with you today is actually because for me personally, as well as for many other artists and my friends that are artists, creating ourselves a future and present moment where we can have a freedom to create while we have the freedom to survive is very important. You know, the idea of being able to create freely and make myself a living out of it is something that makes my heart sing. So this is my mission, is to kind of encourage a conversation and maybe motivate others like myself to take matters in their and our own hands in order to actually create ourselves the life that we want to lead and live as artists. So what's in store for this afternoon? I have here with me 5 great panelists and guest speakers who I'm going to introduce to you in a while. So basically, the way that the afternoon is going to look like is that first I will give you a little presentation about what is a cooperative, as this is our topic for today, and what are the comparison between co-ops and traditional limited private companies. And then I will include our speakers, introduce them. They will introduce themselves, actually. It's very interesting, proud, and artists like ourselves, and very inspiring people. So then we will have a little bit of a conversation about co-ops with them. I have some questions, and after that, we're going to apply the co-op model as a possible solution to the current problems that we are facing in music industry. So I do hope that we are going to get some fruitful answers out of this conversation on how to create a better world for ourselves as musicians. Right, so let me continue here. What is a co-op? So European Cooperative Society defines a co-op as an autonomous association of persons united to meet common economic, social, and cultural goals. And they achieve their objectives through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. So in other words, basically a group of people working together in order to achieve a common goal and a vision and something they all need, and working together on it democratically instead of with a top-down approach like we see in privately owned companies. So normally we have very common co-ops. I'm not going to go into much detail in here because we have actually experts on the panel who can tell a bit more through their experience what a co-op is, but the most common ones are, for example, producer co-ops, where people are selling their products in order to retain a benefit together, or consumer co-ops. Everybody knows about co-op shops. Worker co-ops, where the company is co-owned by the workers, and the workers actually have a right to say about the management of procedures about the workplace, as well as decision to just be part of a decision-making process when it comes to distribution of income. And then we have housing co-ops and also financial co-ops. This is a really interesting topic in terms of a potential to completely change the way that people work together and companies, the way that companies operate together. So I do encourage everyone who wants to contribute in a little bit of a change into the future, investment into a better future, to do some private research on co-ops. There's lots of podcasts and information out there. However, I will want to highlight a little bit about the difference between co-ops and limited companies, because that was a big part for me, which motivated me and inspired me to be interested in cooperative working model. So cooperatives as business entities are owned by its members, as opposed to owned by shareholders, which is the traditional method or traditional ownership in a company. Cooperatives exist to serve its members, not just to increase the profits for the shareholders. Also, the board members come from the membership service and depend through their dedication to the co-op and other members, not just from third-party voted members who actually don't have any other interest in the company except ensuring that the shareholders make money. In co-ops, each member has a vote, one vote per member, in order to make decisions about their working lives, for example, as opposed to traditional limited companies where the amount of shares you own define how many votes or how much say you have in operational matters. And furthermore, whereby the employees have no shares, they have no right to actually define anything around their income or define anything around their environment they're working in. Cooperatives are accountable and serve the interests of all its members, and not just shareholders, not just those who have invested money into it, and not just those who have an economic interest. There has to be an alternative motivation behind the co-op, otherwise it just naturally formulates into a company. So there is certain principles around cooperation. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but those are that the co-ops are voluntary and are based on open membership. They are based on democratic member control, member economic participation. So it's an expectation that every member contributes economically into the outcome of the co-op. It's autonomy and independence is another factor of co-ops, meaning that they have, so creating a co-op requires a foundation of certain principles and articles which are defined by the members. And that's where the biggest part of autonomy, collective autonomy, comes into place, that those interests are defined by the members who make the rules for themselves. And so other three principles are education, training, and information opportunities. The idea that cooperatives support each other, and that there is always an aspect of concern for community. Now, this has been there since 1844 and these are the principles that all co-ops now operate upon. So also in my research, I came across this Canadian Center for the Study of Co-ops, and they have defined 3 pillars as fundamental aspects of good cooperative governance. Those 3 aspects defined by the Canadian Centre for the Study of Co-ops, where cognition, meaning that it's the right view of the future and that everyone has to have the same vision of a future. And collectively, otherwise you can't collectively work towards it if you all imagine yourselves living in a different reality. The second pillar for good cooperative governance was interdependence. So that meaning the way that various actors interact with each other. So let's say that you get funding from the third parties, or the interaction and the relationship between the members, the relationship between the board and the members, and basically all relationships between all actors. And the third pillar they had was basically the importance of legitimacy, so that all decisions and actions are seen as legitimate by the members and other parties. Now, I personally added there a fourth pillar, which I put in the bottom of the whole triangle there, which is the will of personal development as a value. And what does this mean? And why did I put this in the very bottom in there? Is because in any collaboration or cooperative project, there is a bigger challenge of humanity that lies in front of us. And that challenge is to recognize that the only change that we can do is actually within ourselves, in terms of reconsidering our own values and reconsidering our responsibility and taking individual responsibility for our actions and the way that we communicate and collaborate. And I included that as the biggest part of the pillar because we cannot be moving forward as a collaborative humanity or collective humanity if we only consider what we want or what our rights are without any responsibilities. And I wanted to put this in the bottom there to open it as a open up the stage of discussion for all our participants here to talk a little bit about the importance of self-responsibility when it comes to collaborative working and cooperatives. So that's the kind of next point what I was going to get to. I put together a little bit, a couple of conundrums in cooperation and music industry, which I wanted to again open the floor to the speakers before we discuss these matters further and I continue with questions. And introducing our speakers, I wanted to bring out these problems that I see as part of cooperative problems that can arise in cooperatives and also in collectives or people generally working together for one goal. And that is the question of rights versus responsibilities. How can we ensure that everyone pulls their weight? And supply versus demand in terms of who is responsible for making a fundamental change in the way that structures work and function. Are these the people who are providing the services or those who are buying the services? And I think I'm going to leave it there for now, and then I will come back to those conundrums and tie them into my second part of the presentation, which is basically looking at the problems in music industry and if there is alternative business models, and including cooperative models that can tackle the issues that we are facing in the music industry at the moment. But for now, let me continue by introducing you to our speakers and guests. So I'm going to stop sharing this for now. And I would like to first start off by saying hi to Melissa Taylor. She is with us from Resonate, as well as Tailored Communications. But maybe, Melissa, could you please introduce yourself a little bit? And yeah.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. That was a really lovely way to open, really clear explanation. Thank you for that. It's a great place to start. So I've worked in music for 22 years now, 23 maybe. I've always worked in independent music, primarily electronic music. I've worked at nightclubs. I was a journalist for a while. I've recorded as an artist. I've run record labels. But the last kind of 16 years, I've primarily been doing artist management and PR. I have my own company, Tailored Communication. And for about the last 10 years, I felt like I was screaming into the void about the many problems of the music industry, and artists not understanding that, managers not understanding that, and the whole system, even of independent music and electronic music, had become very exploitative. And so a few years ago, I started looking at alternatives and ways that I could support things to be different. And so 2.5 years ago, I think now, I joined Resonate. I met with Peter and with Rich, and just wanted to find a way that I could help artists and create like just a small section of a new music ecosystem, one based on cooperation and better values, ethics, and enable people to have real choices and make ethical decisions about themselves and their careers and be more sustainable. So I joined the board, I'm not sure, 2 years ago maybe, and for the last 1.5 years, I've been working as the communication lead, and I'm part of the executive team now, together with Brandon, Hakanto, Sue, and Jared, who's just joined us, and we're tasked by the members of keeping things running and organised. And yeah, it's one thing I wanted to say is that I am not necessarily the kind of person who would join a cooperative. I'm quite independent and fierce, and I argue a lot. And one of the things that, stop laughing, one of the things that has been just so valuable for me is like learning this system of governance and learning that there are ways of just understanding and building things in a completely different way to what we're taught from tiny children growing up in Western capitalist societies. Like, this is how you do it. All other systems will fail. And I don't believe that. And just being constantly working with people who believe that there's a different way is just wonderful, really. So I will pass over back to you, Paula.
Hello, Melissa. I'm actually really happy you said that, because I'm exactly the same in terms of, I just wanted to pop in here that sometimes when I talk to my friends and family about the co-op or collaboration or collaborating in general, they imagine it immediately a living together in the same bedroom, basically, you know, and it's like, no, I wouldn't be able to live together with 10 people in the same bedroom. No chance.
But
and
there's so many examples of good cooperatives if you really look for them. Like, there's supermarkets in the UK that are cooperatives. There's so many amazing, really old worker-owned cooperative companies. There's banks. Like, all over the world, there's really good examples of what co-ops are. And I think one of the things that we really want at Resonate is that we want to build a network of cooperatives. We don't want to work alone. We want to be this spider web over the whole world that is just an alternative economy that gives people choices.
Absolutely. This is kind of one of the key motivators that was for me to put this thing together, because if I imagine a world where co-op labels are releasing the music on co-op streaming platforms, this completely changes the whole way how everyone works together, also on business to business matters, and so let's continue now with the introduction rounds, and then we can dive deeper on this very interesting conversation. So I'm gonna just go around to the left. Actually, let's do the resonate guys first. Sorry. So let's continue with Brandon.
Hey, peace, everybody. Brandon, he, him pronouns. I'm based in Virginia, in the U.S. I got connected to Resonate. I've been working, developing. I'm a founding member of a co-op federation in Jackson, Mississippi. There's a lot of what we've done is modeled off of Mondragon in Spain. And one of the basic things that we were trying to do is to create a solidarity economy where we have a network of interdependent, interconnected co-ops that help to sustain life, and provide all of the things that we need, whether it be from housing to food to energy, like all of these different things that our communities are without, or that late stage capitalism has neglected. How can we provide that for ourselves, like with our communities, and be able to manage that in a democratic fashion? That was the goal. And I've been a cultural worker for a while. Like one of the ways that we got people connected and energized about being involved in co-ops was through music. We would do reggae days every Saturday and have an open house and talk about the co-ops, folks cooking on the grill, and it's kids playing. We have a jump house for the kids, and and I feel like that's the connector piece, and so having culture, having music, having things that inspire people, I think is a way to have people connected to this. And I got connected to Resonate through a comrade who's also on the board of Resonate, and BSA, Z. And I was transitioning from doing that type of organizing, and I was just thinking like, a way that people can engage in music in a non-extractive way. Like I think that's really cool. And it was folks already working on this type of project. And so I joined, and I think, I'm the lead for the community team. And one of my sort of responsibilities is just, I feel like with the knowledge that I have around cooperation, around community of care, trying to amplify that kind of vibration through the co-op, and in our decision making, in that kind of way. But yeah, thank y'all for inviting us. I'm glad to be here and a part of this conversation.
Thanks a lot, Brandon. I have to say that hearing you describe this motivation and those experiences that cut you into collaboration and cooperative is really heartwarming. I could actually feel it inside me, and I could see myself, playing with this, being part of it. Actually, this is such a. I think this is what every artist wants in the end, is to feel like they belong. Mm-hmm. So I will pass on this microphone speaking stick to Peter now. Hi, Peter, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's really quite exciting to be here today, because I don't think a lot of people know it, but there was a lecture at Transmediala 7 years ago that's really a direct inspiration. Like there's a really specific line that if I hadn't actually been at this particular workshop, I don't know if I would have founded this. I don't know if this idea would have come. So I'm even though this is virtual, we're not actually at Hakkaja right now. I'm really, really happy to be here 7 years later. So I am the founder of Resonate. I sit on the board, and I'm really thrilled to participate in this conversation because, like it was kind of said at the beginning, we kind of need to deprogram ourselves, because I think that we've been brainwashed for hundreds of years to believe that competition is the way that nature operates, but it's really the opposite. It's cooperation. You can go to any ecosystem on Earth and find an equilibrium and a balance that is just mysterious and magical. And that's been kind of missing in human affairs, because it's a benefit to somebody to keep us in, really atomized and individualized. And so that's the aim of the cooperative movement, is to bring us together to create the economies and create the cultures that are of benefit to all, not just a select few. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, it's absolutely wonderful what all of you are doing in terms of, I think, changing the whole dynamics of the industry. And I'm really, really, really excited to see where it's going to go. And I hope that we can bring this information and this inspiration to more people, because that's what it's all about. Otherwise, nothing is going to change.
Absolutely.
We have to spread the message, basically. And for that, I also have some actually more wonderful people to help us do it today that are not part of Resonate. So maybe to you, Alex. Hello, who are you? Why are you here?
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm coming from different perspectives to this problem, as it were, or this set of problems. So even though I guess I certainly appreciate the sentiments and the effort and the work and just the kind of commitment which everyone has kind of expressed so far. I'm coming from a kind of like social praxis background. So there used to be this thing where the state would pay you to make the content and give meaning to the citizens, which they were no longer capable of doing. I guess people are still doing that. I'm not sure anymore, because I've been hiding in a cave for like 4 years. I mean, more or less, definitely the last 2, working on a book project. And that is not an opt-out of the problem of the commons at all. It's actually just about, I think, deciding which medium is appropriate for the goals that you're trying to achieve. So I think the medium of the collective is a very important one. And I hope that I can offer something maybe from a more philosophical or kind of as an observer, because even though I've started collectives and Subtext Radio is still kind of alive and well, and numerous other things which I'm proud of, I'm not in the music industry. So I'm here as a kind of outsider to see if I can throw something in that's helpful, maybe.
Yeah, I brought Alex in with us today because he has a very broad perspective of human complexities and problems working together, and he would be a very good person to come up with some challenging questions, which basically was one of my tasks today, is to kind of come together so we can all really tackle the challenges that can happen if we try to make co-ops a part of music industry. And I hope that Alex will be harsh today on us.
No, not harsh. Not harsh. Not harsh. It's Saturday. Yeah.
Be yourself. Be yourself. That's the important part. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel there's a lot that could be said. So I'm just trying to like trawl through these experiences and these memories, and like, to be honest, it's quite an emotional process, like coming back to that space. So yeah, I really, really appreciate the invitation for that.
Yeah, thanks for joining us and taking your time. And I know it's going to be a very interesting conversation. And finally, over to you, Gary. You are also very interesting background and a completely different approach to everyone here. So
thanks for having me. It's good to be here with you all. Yeah, I live in Berlin, and maybe like Peter, I had a little transmediala awakening, I think probably 12 years ago. And I was just really impressed with this region in the economy or the scene that gave artists who were emerging or maybe kind of established in an underground level a space for exploring and, you know, taking risks and sustaining themselves and giving them a chance to do that. And I really, my eyes widened to that possibility through these different festivals and funding programs. And that's something that I'm not accustomed to coming from the States. Around that same time, I started a record label called Care of Editions. And this has been a playground for me to design distribution models, business models that just don't operate the way that we're used to. So reversing the flow of money or just completely going off in a different direction and treating downloads like a material for performance, which this was the starting point for me. And I've developed it into a different kind of practice where we're producing in a collaborative way audiovisual materials and publishing that. And so it's more of an art practice now than strictly a music label. At the same time, I'm a teacher and a mentor, and at Catalyst and UDK and some other places in Berlin. And my subject is largely about strategy and positioning and music industry and these questions of kind of developing your identity. And what I find really valuable is that this is not in any kind of contradiction to someone who would be working in a cooperative or in contradiction to someone whose goals are maybe less financially motivated and more about just developing the best work that they can do. I think, starting point with cooperatives was inspired by Richard Wolff. I'm sure you all have come across his name, Democracy in the Workplace. And what I found so inspiring about the way he describes a cooperative is that it's not so radical, like it can be radically different than what we have. But if you want to try to win the hearts and minds of people who are accustomed to, you know, a little bit of democracy here and a lot of capitalism over here, it's a nice way to say you can still have different roles in the cooperative. You can still have different salaries. You can still have people whose job it is to set the vision, but you don't have this kind of disparity of the board members and the investors are just running away with the profits and the heck with all the rest of you. You know, here's your crumbs, go home. And I think that that's a huge difference, but it's also not throwing away the rules of marketing. It's not throwing away the rules of competition. Competition in an artistic space doesn't necessarily mean I have to beat you. It can be, we are improving each other's practice. So, but those dynamics are still, I think, valuable in a cooperative setting and in a setting where there is more like a traditional capitalistic environment. And my job is to kind of bridge those for my students, no matter which direction they go. So that's the perspective I'm coming from.
Thanks a lot, Gary. Do you, just from top of my head now, since you talked about basically giving your students an option and then, you know, they decide what they do with the information you provide them, what is your observation been like in terms of the drives and motivations of our majority of people going one way or the other way?
I see a lot of students just wanting to survive. I mean, of course, there are those who want to be on stage, and that's a healthy, I think, drive as well. There are those who want to be rich and famous, and that's also fine with me. But I think the majority of my students just want to be able to make some music or some art and not be afraid, you know. I think this underlying fear of survival really just, it kills, it's killing, you know, numerous generations of artists and preventing them, killing, I mean, in the sense of their careers, preventing them from taking the risks that they need to. You need a space to be naive, I think, to be creative sometimes. And that's probably one of, in my perspective, one of the biggest problems of the music industry right now.
Personally, I have to say, I think it's one of the biggest problems in our society, not just the music industry, is this survivalism, and we see the value of human life as just a means of survival. And in my mind, it just does not make sense how we call ourselves Homo sapiens, but at the same time just survive, you know, and not thrive. So I hope we can actually, you know, change tables here a little bit and see ways we can thrive. So yeah, this is very interesting because, so back to you, Gary, for a little one more question on this topic is that, are those students of yours who want to survive, are they also willing to take responsibility? Do you see that there is an initiative from those young creative minds to actually say, right, I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna take action so that I can be an artist and I can survive?
Yeah, definitely. I have students who have formed their own collectives, and I collaborate with some of these students. And so they're willing, they just don't know necessarily the direction. They don't necessarily know what action means, right? And it's not their fault. I just don't think any of us really can say, what can we do? Like, it's pretty, the sphere of what you can do, what you have control over, it's sometimes very limited. I think a lot of the answers to our solutions, you know, I think the cooperative model is probably the best solution to the problem of capitalism, or what you could call techno-feudalism, this Amazon's Facebook marketplace. You know, this problem that's ripping the planet apart, you know, producing a select few billionaires and leaving the rest of us to, you know, figure it out. I don't know that the cooperative is the answer to a different set of problems, which comes from digital media. We can talk about it later. I don't want to take up too much time. But what can we do? Like, I'm not in control of global policy. I'm not the person who says, let's have UBI, you know, let's have more grants. I'm not the person that can do that. Neither are my students. So what can we do? I think starting a collective is a good place, but I also think it's, honestly, I think the best thing a young artist can do is figure out what they stand for, who they are, what they want to produce, you know, what their voice is, what their personal artistic DNA is, and all of the other things are less important. That's my opinion.
Yeah, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I would see is that every cooperative starts from a collaborative work. So Peter, for example, from when you started Resonate, the way I would have it in my head is that you would be there with a group of people who have a similar vision and idea, and then you create a co-op, because that is the business model that exists there to support collaborative goals. But my question now to you is actually, how can you make sure that everyone pulls their weight? And how do you, if let's say that our mission now is to encourage co-ops being formed as part of a structural music industry, but then conflicts happen, you know, people argue. This is why I was a bit laughing before what Melissa said, because I've recently been really struggling with working with artists who don't necessarily want to contribute, but want to take and want to be given and everything to be done for them, but don't actually want to do something themselves. And then we end up in this problem where you have a bunch of artists being unhappy that they have to give away 50% of their income to some manager, but at the same time, they don't want to actually do anything else except the creative part, you know? So I guess the question to you, Peter, is like, would you maybe elaborate a little bit about the beginning process of creating the co-op and the communicative and individual personal troubles that you had, maybe, or challenges you had to overcome with other people in order to get to a place of actually establishing it?
Wow, there's kind of a lot to I mean, I can think of so many different examples. And your intuition though was not correct about the founding. It was strictly my idea, and I was like kind of like the lone founder that, you know, had it and just decided to pursue it and commit to it. Although I think actually, no, that's not even totally true, because there's a silent co-founder that most people don't know about. That's my partner, Susanna Stauk. She's the one that told me to go to Transmediala 7 years ago. And so she's actually the reason this whole thing exists. So, and she was like the constant sounding board on a day-to-day basis of, you know, what I was struggling with and going through. A lot of the early struggles were about volunteer capacity and trying to coordinate that, because it was, you know, the funding problem with co-ops is pretty intense. And so we really have had to rely on volunteer contributions for a very long time. And in the early days, people would come and go, and it would be very difficult to build a momentum towards something and then have, you know, people kind of drop out and say, oh, I got a job and or this other project came up, and so it was, you know, finding people that had the vision and the commitment was a challenge. But there's still quite a few people here in our community 7 years later that came in the early days. And so I think it really does depend on the quality and character of the individual. And this topic that you mentioned about the sort of passivity around just do it for me is endemic. It's not just the artists. You know, on the sort of consumer side, it's, I would say, even worse, because it's one of the huge challenges we've had over the years is like trying to say, hold on, it's going to get better. It may take a while, but it's going to get better. It's improving, you know, because most people have absolutely no idea how much work goes into building stuff on a screen. You know, making something like a functional streaming service. The amount of labor that goes into that is just breathtaking. And most people have just no sense of that. They go to an app store and just download something and they're using it within minutes, and they don't see the blood, sweat, and tears that went into those processes. So, yeah, the kind of wait and see, or the kind of passive, just give it to me, you know, or I'll use it when it works. I remember one particular comment saying, like, you know, I like your idea, but your service is terrible. And the attitude there was just like, okay, well then go back to that other place where they've got tons of money and they're basically taking tons of money from all the artists, and you know, it works perfectly. It'll do exactly what you want, but you're essentially exploiting people in the process. So I think it, you know, in these early days, it really is about attracting in folks that have the same set of values and are committed to a long-term vision. And if there are others that really don't, you know, they can't roll with that, then just let them go. You know, don't fight it. That's my recommendation.
Yeah, that's actually ties nicely to my next question, which is the supply and demand problem. Yeah, so in this problem where we have a lot of artists now boycotting Spotify, for example, I'm going to be a bit of a, but so I have to say that recently, I think right now is the time for a change in terms of, for example, streaming services, especially since Spotify founders are making investments into artificial battlefield maps. I don't know how the word ethical and battlefield can even go in the same sentence. Yeah. And what's the most ridiculous about it is that this is an absolute, the most, I think, opposing force of creativity and music. It's like destruction, you know. So as much as I can spread the word, I'm going to do it. Yeah. But now the question is that maybe for you, Melissa, what do you think? Is it going to be like a symbiosis between the artists who are boycotting, let's say, the major streaming services and the consumers who are then following their artists onto the alternative platforms? Or should it be the education of the consumers? Or because I saw that some of the artists who are, for example, have released their music on Resonate, have some of that music also exist on Spotify. But then if you publish the same music on Resonate and Spotify, then it defies the whole purpose, or in my eyes, or because then it just makes Resonate another platform.
No.
How do you drive the supply demand in order to make a change? You know, we know that.
I think in the short term, we don't have the right to ask for exclusivity because we're still building. Yeah. And it doesn't make sense for us to make those demands on artists. Like, we're going to do the best that we can as fast as we can. And any support people can give us along the way is what we need. Ultimately, my hope is that when we're closest to our vision of what we all believe we can be, maybe that's the end of this year, you know, when we're fully realized in what I think our vision or our roadmap is, then I hope that people will start making better ethical choices. But in the meantime, just come. Like, just, I would never push anyone away from engaging with the co-op just because they're not willing to go all in. Like, this is a process. It's like you said, it's a learning process. It's a cooperation, it's building. So we should do all of these things together. What grates with me a little bit is that people know that Spotify are investing in smart battlefield technology. They know that they don't pay artists. They know that they're basically ripping off consumers as well with their shitty subscription model, and that all of that money from it is going for them having insanely fancy offices and whatever else. And yet it took Neil Young getting busy for them to make the choice to suddenly boycott Spotify. I mean, I draw the line at Joni Mitchell. She's a national treasure. This is not cool, but there's so many times along the road where people could have made the decision to come off Spotify. And they haven't. It's taken until now for like this to really gain traction, but it's also part of a process. The press, you can see the way that the media have gone from just blindly accepting Spotify as the streaming medium. 3 years ago, when I did an interview with Pitchfork 3 or 4 years ago now, with a lot of other electronic musicians talking about why Spotify was shit, why it was exploitative. And people were like, wow, we've never thought of this. Like, really? You didn't even, like, do none of you people read your contracts? Do you just do what your manager tells you, or you just do what your record label tells you? And this is part of the problem with artists. And this is what I've been trying to do for so long. I teach at Clive Davis Institute, and I try and like do panels like this as much as I can to try and just get the word out and get people thinking about the fact that they have choices. And you have to think about the value, you have to think about exploitation. And even if something is good for you, maybe it's really shit for all of your friends and all of your collaborators and all of other people who might have different privileges or different support systems than you do, different financial backgrounds, whatever it is. Just you blindly supporting something because it's okay for me and not thinking about how it's affecting everyone else or how it's affecting the entire music industry is very blind. And so I hope that I see this changing. It's changing the conversation in the media. The artists all have a completely different way of thinking about Spotify than they did 3 years ago. So it's just slowly come to us, come round to different ways of thinking about things, and any support is good support. And when we're brilliant, that's when you cut off all the others.
Yeah, I totally feel you there. And I'm kind of like, I like to keep my focus on the positive vision of what is possible than what is not, what is potentially can go wrong or can be an obstacle, you know, but we have to think about these things. Like, for example, that, so when I see it, I can see that there's going to be, let's be honest, the majority of pop music produced by Universal Music and all big labels is going to be remaining the same model. It's going to be remaining to be streamed on Spotify. Is going to be following the same pattern and structure. So I kind of been wondering if maybe people need some music education, basically, to just generally develop better taste in music, to move away from that. It's a bit of my cheeky comment in there. But maybe Brandon, you can tell us a little bit, because what I've learned is that co-ops are actually way more common in the United States than they are in Europe. So I would like to have a little bit of understanding there. Why is it such a more developed working model in the States than it is in Europe, and how can we in Europe inspire people to start businesses on cooperative models? What are your takes from your own community in the States, Brandon?
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I think about co-ops. I'm glad that that they exist. I'm glad that people are deciding to organize, you know, their business structures in these ways. One thing for me though, I feel like co-ops aren't the end all. I think that, you know, for me, the ultimate goal is social transformation. I've seen co-ops that have been part of like gentrifying neighborhoods. You know, I've seen co-ops that have, you know, have extracted from communities. They may be, you know, economically, you know, democratic amongst themselves, but how they relate to, you know, the community that they're around may not be like the most beneficial or like symbiotic sort of relationship. And so for me, I think it's a question of dual power. Like how can we center like our decision making where like marginalized communities, where folks who have been getting the short end of the stick are able to democratically sort of like determine their future, determine like you know, decide on the things that matter in their life, you know. And so for me, I think about like, how are we, while we're engaging in these forms of decision making, these forms of economic exchange amongst each other, how are we also delinking from these systems that are harming us, right? Delinking from them, and also like, because they're gonna put more fires in front of you to keep you off your track, to keep you off your mission. So it's like, how are we building that? But also like, the beast isn't gonna like take his foot off our neck. It's gonna still be there if we don't address it, you know. And so for me, it's a combination. And when we're talking about like Spotify and like where we're at, you know, where Resonate is at right now, I think about, and what you were even saying about pop music, I think it's a thing around tastemakers. I think it's a thing around like people who are like legacy workers, people who are holders of culture. Those being the people that help to inspire a movement, a wave of people operating and moving in a different fashion, you know. And I think that, you know, we're connected to some of those folks. Some of those folks are amongst us, you know, like we're some of those people. And I think it's a thing around like, how do we we organize. You know, how do we get our things together in order to make that change and to make that shift. And for me, when I think about Resonate, I'm not like, I don't tell people to hold on. I'm like, yo, like build with us. Because you know, like Spotify, I don't have Facebook, Instagram, I don't have any say on how the platform operates. My data is being sold. You know, like, you know, they're selling it to all of these corporations, you know, to get our information, to see how we are, our consumer patterns. You know, like we're developing a platform where like you can be involved in the decision making around like how the platform operates, how it looks. Our data is not being sold. Like we have privacy, you know, security, you know, all of these different things that like, I'm like, yo, it's possible for us to be able to like collectively decide how we want to move online together. And that's something these other platforms aren't concerned with. They're concerned with like, how can they continue to take from us? You know, I think for me, like my ultimate goal is like, how can we be like more fully human? And the more fully human aspect, I think is around us being able to engage in all sort of aspects of the economic system, the economic chain. You know, because like we're only on the side where like we're consumers and like we're zombies, like, and they just, you know, they just keep they keep us sedated and keep us like buying, you know. But how, like, what if we owned our means of production? What if we, you know, democratically you know, determined amongst ourselves how we manage that? You know, like these things I feel like make us more human and make us more connected to our labor, you know, and less alienated and isolated, you know. And I feel like those are that's one of the reasons I got involved in Resonate, because I see that possibility for artists, you know, artists who've been extracted from by the labels, by the major industries. I think about Clive Stubblefield, who was the drummer for James Brown. And I think about hip hop, and even if the samples are like tracked in the, you know, and the record label gets the money, you know, the artists don't even get the money. So it's just like they've created systems that keep artists, you know, from actually benefiting from the wealth generation that they create, you know. And so like, I'm like, how can we engage in repair? How can we level, you know, bring those resources back to the communities that created it? So yeah.
Yeah, very interesting, because I had a little moment of like enlightenment there with your comment, Brandon, because I kind of realized myself here that maybe I miscommunicated a little bit what I meant by pop music. So when I said pop music earlier, I actually didn't mean it as a genre, but I rather meant it as objectification of artists and consumers as a product. You know,
Understood.
It's like the algorithms, the music that gets produced just to be sold loses its soul. It loses its artistic value. And then you have all these artists who just end up being products, who actually are no longer having the authentic space of expression. Yeah. But I really appreciate at the same time that message that came back to me is like, hold on, you know, it's not about pop music. It's not actually pop music's fault. Yeah. It's the structures that we have created that are eliminating or limiting authentic expression, you know. And I think that kind of goes back to, again, this point what I was making earlier about the will and determination to self-reflect and learn. Because when we are anything that we are doing together collaboratively or in a cooperative way, we have to understand that it's our own, we are our own biggest enemy, you know. Otherwise we end up always fighting and fighting and fighting for our rights or whatever. Yeah. And yeah, so actually, maybe Alex, you can share with us a little bit your experience in collaborative projects and why you're not anymore part of any collectives, because I'm sure there is some pain point, personal journey reflective on that factor that we're just talking about in there. Well, this is there.
Yeah. So I have the luxury of everyone else going first, I think, mostly. And so I can kind of cherry pick a few things which I was interested in. So from a pragmatic side, you talked about at the very beginning, like how to navigate egos, really. I think what I was thinking about like yesterday, just reflecting on all this stuff, is that, you know, people's neuroses are a fact, right? So everyone has like parts of their personality which don't necessarily fit into a collective way of working. And I think rather than even trying to kind of avoid those, I think maybe what we need as collectives are kind of coherent maps of one another's pressure points and one another. And so like context is really important to all of the things really which have been discussed as well. It's hard to kind of generalize. But, you know, and then, you know, Gary, you talked a bit about, you know, the most important thing is self-determination and sort of do you. And I totally agree with that sentiment as well. But then what happens if you kind of look inside and you realize that, you know, there's that thing, like if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, right? Like that's been a big motivating idea for me over the years. And so trying to kind of bring that sentiment into a working reality, a financial reality, a social reality. Of course, it comes with certain conflicts, but none of those, I think, have to be sort of like fatal to the idea of the collective itself. And actually, I would emphasize, not that I have withdrawn myself from all the collectives which I've been involved in. So interdisciplinary research into urban wastelands, research through radio, working with migrant theatre for 7 years. I've been involved in like a bunch of different collectives and a bunch of different maelstroms of social and demographic interaction and everything. It's more just the question of saying, like, how can I be most helpful? Like, go where you're needed. You know, that's really the thing. It's like, if you're privileged enough to have those experiences, you're going to get reflective moments, and then you're going to try and like reapply them. But the other thing as well is, and it's also come up, is like, how do you make it manageable? You know, like, I think also you come back to this thing of like rights versus responsibilities. It's very complex. It's going on actually in the world around us all the time. And of course, like, human rights more generally are seeing a huge decrease, and we go through this period of like isolation and reduction. So those are big questions which aren't just in the music industry, and they're certainly not just in the art industry and everything else, but they're critical. And if you can use what you do in your collective as a way to understand those positions more clearly in terms of your own context, then I think that's definitely a very good reason to continue in that vein, right? Like, if what you're doing gives you joy, if it gives you granularity, if it gives you clarity about the interrelatedness of things, then I think pursue that. But if you need to say at some point, like, actually, I'd probably be more helpful if I took a back seat, or if I passed that on to someone else, then maybe that's also a privilege which I've been afforded. But I think, yeah, so I mean, in terms of music, it's fascinating for me because I try to look at it and be like, okay, what's my relationship to this? You know, I'm not a musician. I don't have that moment where I can play an instrument and immediately the effects and the appreciation of that are felt around me, you know? I don't have that sense of like immediacy, which I think musicians inevitably experience. And so then you get into a more theoretical space and you think, well, okay, then what is it that is binding communities around cultures? You know, that's something which, Brandon, you talked about in the States. Again, like, it's such good work. I don't have anything bad to say about any of that stuff. Like, that is the work, like, as one might put it. But I do reflect on this idea of, and I just want to sort of finish on this for this part of my commentary or whatever, but like, if there is this idea of the slow cancellation of the future, right? So Mark Fisher makes this point about the way in which there are no new genres. that like in jungle music in London was like the last time for him when he could say that there was a genre of music, which when it came out, people were like, is that music? You know, that has happened over history, right? So punk, pop, even classical music was actually not accepted in its early stages. And we're in that space where like, okay, there are new, you know, everything is consumed, everything is encased and encapsulated by the market. It's very hard to get around that. And that is reflected for Fisher in the fact that there are no new genres. So if the future is cancelled, as he put it, which I don't believe, then what is left? Is it just fragments of the future that we are left to try and identify and isolate and sort of nourish? I think that's what you're doing today, is like you're bringing up a lot of stuff, a lot of important people who are coming together and saying like, where are those fragments of the future? And I think what you're doing, Resonate, really looks like one of those fragments, actually. That looks incredibly encouraging. And, you know, my relationship with collective production is that I just decided that I can't do it full time. I can do it like every 4 months or every 6 months. So there are 3 co-curators with myself for Subtext Radio, and we started it in Berlin. I've been in Germany for 10 years now. And I just, you know, created reasonable expectations from the very beginning and just said, you know, we're going to do this for like 15 hours live, but we're not going to do it every week. We're not going to do it even every month if we can't do it, because that's not the model. There's not a financial model behind it. It's like, it's a sustenance model. It's about research. It's about supporting each other. It's about familiarity over time. Yeah, anyway, so some of my sort of shootings off into this kind of like bucket full of different problems maybe, but that works actually to limit expectations and to give things parameters. In my experience, that really works. Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. That's actually, yeah, we have a lot to talk about in terms of music industry, but before I go fully into that creative topic, I actually have one which I consider the most important question about the co-ops when it comes to my mind as in terms of the operation, and that is the democracy and the democratic procedure. If every member has one vote, and then let's say you have 60% of people voting for one thing and 40% of people for the other thing, is this a common scenario, first of all? And how do you then accommodate for the well-being of those who are the minorities? Like basically every standard democratic question, like what is democracy in the eyes of Resonant, and how do you ensure that all the members are happy in a model that maybe excludes them if their opinion is not a majority opinion? So anyone who wants to answer that question is welcome to.
I'll have a go. I think, I mean, part of it is just having open discussion, like being able to contribute to the discussion and the decision making is still more than you get from most other ways of creating companies or using platforms or building platforms. Like, maybe you can't expect everyone to be happy with every decision, but to know that their voice has been heard, to know that maybe the outcome has changed slightly because of what they've said. It still might not be the perfect outcome, but it might be different from the initial idea through that discussion, through that decision-making process. And that's really important and really valuable. And one thing I wanted to say about Resonate is one of the things, like, sometimes I look back on the last 2 years and I'm like, oh, we haven't made enough progress. Because in some ways with the technology, I'm frustrated because we don't have enough funding and we don't have enough developers. And so that side of things looks very slow to me, being on the inside. But what has been done, the amazing work that we've done, is actually in the governance side of things, in the democracy side of things, in reforming the co-op and the systems within the co-op for decision-making, for governing, for making sure that people's voices are heard, even just with our forum. like the forum is open and everyone can be there, and everything is transparent. Like my conversations with Peter and Brandon, pretty much anyone can see what we're talking about. Like you just click on the link and it's all there. It's like this record of thought processes and a record of our ideas and our sharing, which is just completely revolutionary in many ways to many people. And that I think is such good work, because it's developing the structure for how we will move forward. And without having that basis, this root system of understanding and knowing where you put your thought process, where people will listen to you, how you can put forward an idea, how you can have that idea come to reality, it's just hugely valuable. And I know Brandon feels the same way about that.
That was a really beautiful answer. Thank you for that, Melissa. I really think if I didn't know anything about co-ops and I would listen to this, it would take away the biggest fears. I think people are really afraid of the unknown and afraid of doing things differently, and it's a complicated process to write your articles. I think this is probably the reason why there is not so many co-ops in music industry or creative industry in Europe, is because people just feel like too much to handle.
Well, actually, one of the things with us doing all of this work, and I have hats off to Hercanto, who has been like the driving force of so much of this organization with the governance and within the co-op, is that we can provide a model for others to follow. Everything we do is open. We're an open source platform. We want you to copy us. We want other co-ops to see us as an inspiration or a partner or a roadmap or whatever it is. You can take the work that we're doing and apply that to the thing that you want to do, and then take it even further. And we'll then look at you as an inspiration and take ideas back into our co-op. And that's how it should be, this like spider web of ideas and connections and development.
Yeah, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
I'm beside myself. I love hearing that, because like that's why I did it. I had years of just soul crushing like frustration and struggle that so many people don't even know about. But it's like that's why I did it. I wanted this to be an inspiration to others, and to know that that's like sunk into the DNA of the organization, that Melissa now says that that's the point. It's like, yay.
It is the point, but it's also part of that like unlearning. Like that's not the point of most companies. Most companies don't want you to copy them. The music industry is full of barriers put around things, whether it's 3 notes that's played in a particular way, and that's mine because I've said it's mine and I've done it the first time, even though that's fucking impossible. And we're in this system where it's constant like shielding. No, this is mine. No, if I'm going to keep this, it's for my profit, my people, and a cooperative and a system of membership like we have is the exact opposite. It's about like take it out and spread it.
Totally. So I would like to actually say to all our listeners and anyone who watches this, is that really, if you want to do things differently and you don't know how and where to start, then just start a conversation. Reach out to any of us in this call. I think anyone here is happy to support each other. And, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm sure Peter didn't know what he was doing, when he started. We are all in the same pot here. And this is why we are here, to have this conversation. So just, I'm going to quickly check in if we have any questions at all. Done? No. So let us continue on the actually music industry topic. And I'm gonna share my screen quickly to give you a little overview of our concept of cooperative label, and then I am really looking forward to hear from Gary about his models, business models, alternative business experience with alternative business models in the music industry. Because I think it's important to have options to choose from and combine them together in order to maybe come to the best solutions. So I have here. Can you see my screen? So, so I've identified two main problems in the music industry. And these are the value of art, basically, as the key, which is everyone consumes music on a daily basis. Most people do. Music or visual art, but it's around us everywhere, and it's in our lives and has a very strong impact on our lives on a very daily basis. However, we do not, excuse me, I need to change my language because I do, but certain constructs in society do not value art for what it is. It's almost like it's not a product in its own right, or that artists are not doing any work, or, those who, for example, are creators, they know it takes very long to master your tools and to learn new skills, as it is with every other product. And so the big problem is having to revalue our own values in creative industry. Now, the second problem is the unequal bargaining power. And I think this is the kind of an umbrella problem to all the other symptoms. And the other symptoms are basically the unbalanced distribution of funds, limited rights to your music when you sign with a record label, and limited creative freedom when you become a more renowned artist, then that has their own brand and then has to buy to this brand off. And this is what happens when names become big. So I believe that all these problems of limited rights, limited creative freedom, and unbalanced income is all due to the unequal bargaining power, because the value of the art is not being seen. What do you, Gary, think that there's anything else that needs to be mentioned in there which I missed out on?
I guess if I were going to unpack the problem a little bit, I would start with, let's play a mental game. Imagine that Spotify were instantly transformed into a cooperative. That would do a lot of good, right? It would sort of alleviate some of the problems of billionaires investing into, war machines and everything like this. It would alleviate the problem of just a small amount of people running with all the profits. But at the end of the day, the benefit, the consumer benefit to Spotify is baked into digital materiality, right? It doesn't cost a whole lot of money to just spread it around and distribute it, stream it, copy it, whatever. That's part of what it is. And you can't undo that. You can't say, hey, listeners, you know what? We know you love the sweet taste of free music, but we're going to just ask you, please pay a little bit more because it'll make you feel good. That is a good thing. It will produce some benefit, but, the fair trade coffee market doesn't, really have a big place on the shelf compared to the overall spectrum of coffee sales. And it's the same in the music industry. It's probably worse because the amount of gravity that goes to the number one in any category is heavier in the digital sphere. YouTube is number one. Who's number two? Very far in the distance, right? It's the same with Spotify. They're number one. Who's number two? Very far in the distance. That's the network effect. It's magnified on the internet, right? Having a bigger catalog is the benefit. So that's the benefit. And if we flipped it around and said, okay, the musicians who are on the platform in the catalog are now shareholders, right? They are the ones who get the profits. Every musician gets one share. That money is still spread across this endless, seemingly endless amount of music. It's not going to radically change the lives of most musicians. It'll be better than what we have now, a lot better. And I want that to happen. If I had a magic wand, I'd say, let's do it. I'm allied with this proposition. But just like Brandon was saying, it's not the end, right? It won't really produce a sustainable economy for those artists who are, like I said before, emerging or maybe established in an underground sense, the way that they could have established themselves or sustained themselves prior to the streaming era, right? So the problem is deeper, and the problem is with the digital materiality. What do we do in that circumstance? I think copyright laws are prohibiting us from even reaping the benefits of having a streaming era in which we can easily share, manipulate, remix, sample everything around us. That opens the door to more people becoming creative. Like, I want people to sample all kinds of music. I want people to say, I don't know how to make music, but I made this awesome mixtape. I want that to happen. I don't want YouTube to take it down. That's not the future I'm fighting for. I want to loosen copyright laws. I want to unleash the creativity. Let me just jump really quick to Alex's point. All due respect to Mark Fisher, and I think he's somebody we should all kind of like check out. And he's not wrong when he describes what's going on as a kind of dark age in the history of music. But there's also people like Virgil Abloh who says right now is a renaissance. And how can they both be right? They're not both right. But I think that we're in this moment that would be a renaissance if we let it happen, if we rose to the moment, right? That's what I want to happen. We get whiffs of a renaissance, with people who are in the right place at the right time. I want that to be spread out across a wider spectrum of the creative world, right? And I think that a lot of these solutions that we put on the table will take us a far, far, way on this path. But a lot of it is a mentality change. I think what Brandon and Melissa were talking about, it is about this like giving mentality rather than taking mentality. Like, maybe don't just release an album, release the stems, release your Ableton patch, like share the love, help other people, be a mentor. Right? I think that, rather than just give out grants with all these strings tied to it, just give people money to make art. Give people money to be art teachers. Don't put them through this curatorial process that, really makes them kind of like a kind of form of propaganda back to the state. Just let it happen. That's what my pitch would be.
Yeah. Also, I would add collaboration in there, I think. Totally. It's something that is really overlooked, the value of it, perhaps, when we are looking at, it's my music or my release or my, but personally, my biggest learning experiences were collaborating with other artists. It's just been the most meaningful experience. We do have a question from YouTube, however, from Lazy Eye, and they say that back to Gary's early point on bridging gaps between the individual capitalistic pursuit and the pure democratic approach of a co-op, do you think that there is a need to, as idealists, compromise our often perceived as radical messaging and output in order to be able to have a more open conversation about the structures?
Me, or is it to the group? Because I don't necessarily think that I have to answer this question.
Yeah, it's for Gary. I guess it's for Gary. Dan says the message that it's for Gary.
The word compromise is maybe a little bit heavy. I think I don't know if you need to compromise what you're doing or how you're messaging. I think you can still hit the nail on the head, and you can still go for it and be bold. But there is a way of kind of speaking to your audience and finding them where they are. That's not compromising, right? That's communicating. And I think you can do that. So hang on to your principles. I often find it as a kind of a badge of honor that my students can't tell the difference if I'm, you know, a Maoist or a Jeff Bezos kind of person. Like I'm sort of swimming in this like different territory. But I think that no, you don't need to compromise. I don't think so. I think that you just need to be able to communicate and be able to understand where the real problem is. Like a lot of people hang on to the principles with almost kind of blinder mentality. Like, no, it's this, it's got to be this. And they don't realize that if you just open up a little bit, that you guys are on the same page, who you're talking to. I hope that helps a little bit. I might have avoided the question, but I think that's how I would put it.
I mean, if I may, there's just a short point, but something that I've been hearing people talk about recently is like, you don't need to have everyone be in the same place politically in order to have them see the benefits in doing what you're doing, you know, and actually maybe one of the kind of structural approaches for this kind of thing would be to focus simply like to make it better, make it good, you know, and then people will use it, and you're not going to get everyone who's as passionate or politically in the same place as you, you know.
Yeah, I mean, a real practical description of that for us is that we're a community. It's a real community. You can actually jump in and talk to people, and you don't get that anywhere else. And our player may not be as robust as other players, but where else can you actually participate in a community and talk to other people that are part of it? And whether it's your colleagues or your peers or people, you know, building this thing, you just can't do that anywhere else. So that makes it more fun, I hope.
You're muted, Paula.
Paula, you're muted. Uh-oh, Paula.
Or are we muted? She has to do it again with the same hand gestures, I hope.
Oh, actually, her mic is showing that it's not muted,
Yeah.
so somehow the sound disappeared on maybe your computer.
Hello. Yeah.
Oh no.
We can
There you
hear
are. Welcome back.
I have a techie right here for the Zoom tech. I was just saying that Alex was saying about politics, but at the same time we talk about community. And personally, I find the importance of sitting together and just visualizing and imagining, and imagination for a life that is possible without getting too much detailed in the politics is kind of a motivation, been a motivation for me. But Lazy Eye, I actually wanted to hear also Brandon's perspective on the question, on this question about bridging gaps between individual capitalistic pursuits and the democratic approach, and how to achieve it basically through means of communication.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think, you know, real change takes time, you know, and building relationships and building trust amongst people takes time. I know that I have my perspective on like how I want the world to be shaped and transformed. I'm going to continue to share that perspective with anyone that I cross paths with. I know that I can learn something from any and everybody. And if there's alignment in terms of like what our goals are, then I think that we can, you know, work on those things together. My thing is just like, they're, you know, the people that may like think they're capitalists, but if they're not like owning their means of production, they're not capitalists. And there's a very small class of people that, you know, own it and control like a lot of society. You know, and so it's you know, you might have that kind of mindset of wanting to be that, but like that's not like who you are, you know. So I just think in terms of how can we yeah, it's just learning from people and sharing perspective and like hopefully shaping something that like is more in right relationship with the earth, you know, more in right relationship with each other. Yeah, I don't think we have to complicate it, and I don't think that we have to like mince our words. Yeah.
It's the personal responsibility on those things, you know, like you say about the earth, for example, you know, we can always talk about things, but it's about what do I do in this very moment in my life to create something that I see value in. Yeah, so this I'm gonna put back for a last bit of my presentation, and this part will be about our project. I would be keen to hear about the approach that we have have adopted ourselves, and I hope that it can maybe be adopted by other labels too. And so, yeah, our inspiration originally comes from, there's so much suffering and so many problems currently in different areas of life and society, and the you know, usually the action around it is criticism, complaining, and blaming someone else, always saying it's an external factor to ourselves. It's because of the government, it's because of Spotify, it's because of the structures or systems that exist outside of us, why we cannot do something differently. And in order to, you know, this is like where the macro and the microcosmos come together, because that's why I put the importance of kind of developing our personal will, vision, love for existence, love for creativity in order to make something new in structures. So I'm going to share my screen here again. So we did the problems in music industry before, and my next slide is actually definition of what we said, what artists want, in order to have a look at how can we provide artists and ourselves what we want as organizations. So I've put in here that artists want autonomy of creative expression. So they want to be, we want to be creative without limitation, while making a living from the product that we are providing. That is our creative output, just like everyone else, just like every other product. There's no, so before I highlighted that it's really a restructuring of values that has to take place a little bit, because art is consumed by everyone on a daily basis, and it's not given the same value as other products and other services. And that is just very, very unbalanced, considering that it is holds such a big part of our daily lives. Now, the third point I've highlighted is that feeling of belonging and community. This is what every human being wants. And also opportunity to grow and evolve as a person, and yeah, to upskill yourself. These four things are just, to me, I believe every human is a creative person, and whatever they do, whatever we want, these are like our basis of human needs. So basically, then I went on to have a look if a co-op model can provide artists and communities what they want. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about our model at Field Conspiracy. So basically, the whole thing started for envisioning a future whereby everybody in a society contributes a little bit in order for the infrastructures to maintain stable. So I would give an example of, this was where the idea process started. I was thinking, you know, if every single one of us would have once a year a obligation to collect cigarette butts on the streets. It's a job that nobody wants to do, but it's a job that needs to be done so that we have clean communities. And if everyone contributes a little bit into things they don't want to do, but that are necessary, then this is actually a way we can reduce hierarchies in our society, reduce this idea that I'm a cleaner and you're a big rich man CEO. And so that kind of became the initiative. I was like, okay, why can't we work together as musicians when we want to basically, we all want to be creators. Everybody wants to do as little as possible, all the social media, the boring admin work, and everyone wants to be making music and do creative work. The fact is that there is only a certain amount of things and tasks that need to be done in order for a release to take place, for example. It's only in our corporate companies, or where, so I used to be, let's say, a marketing manager, where there is always more work, there's always more to push for, there's always more sales to push for, there's always more, yeah? But if you work as a community, and then you kind of reduce, for example, immediately the pressure to do extra marketing, because your community on an individual level, on a collective level, everybody has individual communities. They become the support, the kind of a marketing platform, yeah. And that's kind of what was one thing about creating flat hierarchies, and through that more space to create. Now, the second big part of it is the finances and the distribution of finances. And in the co-op model, everybody has a right to contribute into the decision-making process and how the funds are distributed between everyone. So, for example, in terms of copyright, we thought that, you know, now we have NFTs, which are a great way of securing contracts between artists and labels, so that we could have 3 years of the commitment from the artist, where their creative work is generating income for the label. And then after 3 years, that gets transferred solely to the artist. So there is a time clause whereby when the copyright transfer is taking place, for example, and that's automatic because we have the technology for it now. And so another thing which we have is that it's not just a label. We have more the idea of a community belonging. So, for example, the shared knowledge, shared feedback, shared samples, shared. We have now visual artists who are like artists on label. So if you're a musician and you're like, oh, I like the artwork of this person, you give them your music, they make artwork listening to your music, and then the label works as a promotional platform also for the visual art, so that it's a symbiosis between the two. It's not just the label. The idea is not to just collect the label, but to create something where people can exist free in creativity while also being able to survive. You know? No, while being able to thrive, because surviving is pretty shit, you know? let's be honest, like this is what artists are doing. It's just, I think we kind of put ourselves into too low of a threshold. Like, for example, me saying now here that my purpose is to survive. No, my purpose is not to survive. That's why I'm here. But we are constantly being pulled down lower than what the value is. And then lastly, the concept of basically what I see is that the concept of a profession as one thing that somebody has to do for the rest of their lives, and the concept of 9 to 5 work as an expert in sending emails, for example, yeah, this framework limits creativity. And I feel that this is the reason why a lot of artists and creative humans feel like they don't fit in the society at all. They don't fit into the models of how everything exists. And that's also leading into a lot of mental health issues, into poverty, into, yeah, it's not basically, I'm feeling lack of self-confidence, you know, all of these problems. And that's also one of the reasons why I'm out of work, like why basically I can't be pretending that I'm going to be doing the same thing for the rest of my life on one position. So that's why skill sharing becomes important. So the way that we would imagine our operations working is that everybody has a chance to pick up any task which they commit to, which they can commit to and want to commit to, because everybody can do any human is capable of doing anything as long as they put their mind into it and their interest into it. And it's always going to allow upskilling and learning new skills when you open the door for that. And I'm going to leave it there now. And I actually first, before I generally want to talk about the challenges that can come with cooperative model for labels, for example. I would like to hear a bit more about Gary, because I know that you guys are having a very interesting way of sharing work at Catalyst, and it's not necessarily a traditional model of defined titles for the rest of your lives, and how do you practically keep people learning new things and inspired to actually pick up tasks that they never done before? And maybe you can tell a little bit about the way that you share work at Catalyst.
I'm honestly not qualified to speak on that because I am at Catalyst a freelance teacher. So they have a structure in their company. I don't even know what it's called. And they have these different circles, and whoever's responsible for the different circles is the one who kind of decides what happens. But the responsibilities, it's not like a pyramid. It's more like these are different areas. And so I'm sorry, I'm not the person who is qualified to speak on
that. That's no problem. I just but what about what are your thoughts, everybody, on on the ways that we can make actually, I think a big part of creating a cooperative label is finding people who are dedicated to the cause, because their outcome is not going to be tomorrow. You're not going to get rich tomorrow. This is something that we need to understand, is that these things take time, and good things come to those who wait and put in a certain work, but people want fast results now and tomorrow.
Questions in the chat.
Okay, so we actually have a question also from YouTube. So let's, there's two questions. But I think before I go into the questions, I'm actually curious to hear what do you think about our workaround to the structures and to the problems that we've been trying to solve within our organizational structure?
I mean, I could throw in some, practically speaking, right? I think the reason why it's possible for us to feel that the opportunities for commenting and coming together and expressing ourselves are in decline and that they're threatened or cancelled or whatever you want to call it, at the same time as we live in a time of utopic, perhaps in a good way, like utopianism, rather than just blindness, let's say, where there's a renaissance. The reason why those things are possible at the same time is because of the pure schizophrenia that neoliberalism demands of us and has really encouraged us to find a lifestyle that works with multiple different things. So I don't think that's a good or a bad point, or even an optimistic or a pessimistic one. It's just an observation. But what I think is important is that one should, a collective ought perhaps to find a way to connect the revolutionary politics that drives that collective in the first place to its actual pragmatic existence in the world as a platform. So I don't understand why more platforms don't do it, but we have minimum 50% females performing. We have a minimum 50% females curating. It's such a simple thing. But I think that's what I would offer as a pragmatic step. Like, if you're going to do world shaping and you're going to do something really different, then I would argue, like from my own politics, then yeah, those things don't have to be either, too detached. There's actually a pretty obvious set of programmatic guidelines that gives you.
Carrie, what about your label structure? And I actually was reading into the way that you are basically, what I understood is that you are paying your end users, so listeners, to download the music. Is that right? How does that work actually in practice?
This was a campaign, I think it lasted, I don't know, not quite 10 years, but a long time. And the idea was we would price our downloads in negative money. So whatever the price of the download as a purchaser, you would actually get that money. And I was funding this outgoing expense through the incoming revenue based on vinyl sales. So I ultimately limited downloads and attached them to the speed and number of vinyl sales, right? So as soon as I would have enough money to pay somebody, a new download would pop up and then you could download it and I'd send you a check. Does that make sense? So, I mean, not the reasoning behind it, but the mechanism. I mean, to me, this is, this is a little social experiment that got us on the map. And I think it spoke to what I'm about, what I want to do. And to me, the space of distribution is a space of performance. And it's not just a business space. And I liked that. I liked the blurring of business thinking and art thinking. And that, Mark Leckie is somebody who I admire, and he says to his students, as soon as you start thinking about it as art, you're screwed. And I think that there's something nice when you can't tell anymore what you're doing. I don't mean to be incoherent. I actually think that's not what I'm looking for. But yeah, this was how we started out. And from there on, I've tried a lot of different experiments, and I can tell you where I'm at right now. For the label, I've simplified things, and I just am releasing singles, and it's just with really young artists from all over the world. And I have a team. We're growing at the moment. I think we're about 4, and everybody's really young. And I like my team to work with me, what we call upstream, right? Like, so they are helping set the vision. They are helping curating. Like, don't tell them I'm secretly getting them to take the label from me, right? So I want to remove myself in a way so I can make art and do other, things. I'm saying that jokingly, but it's there's something beautiful about giving over the wheel to other people, and I think that's what a collaboration can offer. It's not so much that nobody has a say; it's that there is activity in this space. People are making, they have thoughts about the vision, where a lot of artists, they just kind of do their thing and they don't ever think about that. They're just like, what do I want to do next? Not what do I stand for and how is this communicating? So that's basically one half of my practice, and the other half is making film and video, and the same team helps me to put that together, and it's how it works.
Thank you. We have 2 questions, actually, from the lazy eye. I'm gonna read out first one, see who wants to answer it, or is there a dedicated person? No. So question 1, there seems to be a misconception that to be part of a community of this sort, you need to sacrifice the individual. Where I have found that individual identify flourishes in structures of a collective nature. What is your experience of individual and artistic growth through collective processes? Who wants to answer this question?
I don't know if I get the question, like where the association with losing your identity is being in a collective. I mean, maybe that's some are like that, but I don't think
I can try to address it. Being involved in collectives for a lot of my life, it's something real about that. Like when you sort of sacrifice your own individual kind of your light because you want the organization, the institution, the cooperative, whatever it is, to be kind of the thing that's leading and kind of shining, and sort of like keeping in line with that vision. I think sometimes, like, yeah, your individuality, your personality, your creativity gets muted in the like producing something that is a broader kind of message. And I think something that I've been learning in these past couple of years, like just healing from being burnt out as an activist and an organizer, is that, the things that inspire me, my creativity, I think I would hate myself if I stopped creating. When I stopped creating and I was just organizing, I was less happy. And so I think it's a thing around like, yeah, the sacrificing of yourself, because, I come from a movement, that, folks are like, serve the people, kind of putting the people before yourself. And that selfless kind of martyrdom bullshit, and it's like, we exist, we're not, we're doing it for people, and we're also doing it for ourselves, so like if we lose that sight of that, I feel like that's a detriment, because you're showing other people that that's the way that you want to relate. And I don't think we want to dim people's light. I think that we want to amplify people's creative capacity. And I think we have to figure out a way to balance that in terms of like having a vision, having a mission, having objectives, all of that kind of stuff, and being able to hold just like our diversity. Our diversity is our strength. It should be looked at as a strength rather than something that divides us, and yeah, I mean, that's a real thing. And I think that we're in the process of experimenting. We're trying to figure that out. Like folks said, we don't have the answers. We have like a roadmap just in terms of some folks who have done some things before that we're taking the best practices, and we're making mistakes. I feel like that, what Gary said about that naivete, like having that space to play, having that space to to fuck up, you know, and like be held by each other and learn, you know, that's how we learn, you know. And so I think all of those things are really, really important. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
I think one of the things that a lot of us have touched on, and which I think Brandon's talking to now as well, is this idea of balance. Like, balance is so important in everything you do, in your human relationships, your relationships with your family, and within a co-op, you know, having balance, having people with different viewpoints, different experiences, and those individuals make the strength and they create that balance. And then managing your time so you don't burn out, and being able to say, this is too much for me, I need to step back now, and just having different people to lean on as well. This is really nice in a co-op, because it's not competitive in the way it could be in a traditional business structure, where if you admit that you are at fault, or you admit that you need help, or that you don't know the answer, it might be looked on badly. Like, what do you mean? You're paid to do that? What? And it's this idea of balance, and yeah, being able to play, being able to fuck up, being able to express ideas and have them heard, and then somebody saying, actually, have you considered it this way? And you having the space within that to be like, actually, I hadn't considered that, and take this on board and develop your own thinking and your own being is something that I find really valuable. And that's the strength in those individuals that make up this whole.
Yeah, I feel there is this kind of duality of that part at the same time, when we are, as humans, on this collective journey of kind of understanding that we are not so much separate from everything else. We're not separate from one another. We're not separate from Mother Earth. You know, we are kind of in this constant process of finding our connection to everything around us, and kind of cooperative as well as collective, and, you know, coming together is kind of a manifestation or an expression of that journey, you know. So but at the same time, when we accept that everyone is a weirdo and unique in their own way, then everyone has the space to be a weirdo and unique in their own way, you know, and without shame, and just be creative in their own space. I think that's where the individuality will then come out. So we also have a second question, also from the Lazy Eye, and they say that, and lastly, I'm actually writing my dissertation on how collective structures can reshape the art industry. And I have found it very difficult to locate a lot of substantial information and resources on co-ops and collectives. The irony of looking for anti-capitalistic structures through capitalistic means is honestly too much. That was a comment there. And the question is, where would you direct people that want to educate themselves and learn about the concepts you've been discussing?
Oh, do you want to go?
Go ahead, Melissa, please.
So actually, I think in the Resonate forum, we have a resource. I don't know if it's public, where we have, we definitely have a list of labels and organizations that are working in this space. I would recommend Art Co-op as a good place to go, as definitely for finding links to other organizations. And I think their work is really valuable, and they have all kinds of seminars, online teaching, and resources. Cooperatives UK, some of the bigger co-op organizations provide resources. So that's a good place to start. And then just finding co-ops that you like and speaking to them would be another way of doing it, I think. Hi.
I think that's a better option than what I have in mind. I just know of a book that I came across recently that I found could be helpful. Co-Art is the name of the book, and it's Artists on Creative Collaboration.
Yeah, I think after our session today, we are also going to put together a little summary of the session in text, and we will certainly attach there some resources. So I can attach the resources from Resonate and everything that we all come up to into one place and share that article. And yeah, before, this has been really quick, time's flying when good ideas are generated. And so before we depart, does anyone here with us today have some final insights or meaningful messages for anyone who wants to start a co-op or wants to do things differently within the music industry in general?
It's kind of a cliche, but be the change.
Yeah, just start.
Yeah.
I'm interested in, I think sometimes it might seem easier to start something new. And one of the things that I would like to see is us help people who have existing label structures who would like to convert to co-op structures, or existing business structures who want to convert to co-op structures. This is something I'm thinking about for my own business. Like, what would that look like? How would I go about it? And for me, that's a big question, because it's very easy to start from the ground up and have a vision, but what's the practical way of converting your business to a different way of being than you have for the last 5 or 10 years or whatever? And I think for record labels, that's a really difficult but interesting proposition. How do you deal with your catalog? How do you deal with old contracts? There's so much there that I hope people will start to do that, and that they'll share that experience with others to enable more people to do that, because then we'd really start to see some real change in the structure of at least the labels.
I mean, I can't speak from the music industry side but maybe the elephant in the room a little bit, I always think with artists who do collectives, is enclosure, and it's important to think about cultural capital, and just to be sort of maybe quite honest with yourself about you might want to do that at some point, right? You might want to take what you've invested into something and then say, this does not have to contradict my performing within this collective, but I now want to do something different, and that's completely fine. And I think just to be kind of honest with yourself about what would happen, the thought experiment, what would happen if Spotify was made into a commons, then also the other way around. What happens if this collective that I'm in, more from an artist side than a music side, because I feel like with the music side, you guys seem to have a lot of really healthy structures, which maybe we don't, just because of the nature of artists perhaps. But I think that's a good, just in terms of self-care, just think about what would it mean if this was enclosed? What does it mean to enclose? What is cultural capital? Do I have any? Can I use it again in a year? What sort of value form is cultural capital? This is a good one.
I like all these comments. I think that there's something worth thinking about, that a label that doesn't really make a lot of money, what does it matter if it's a collective or a cooperative, right? So maybe, the social experiment is still worth it. And I wouldn't dissuade anybody from working in a nonprofit, an unprofitable label. That's totally, welcome to the club, join us. But what I would like to say is that maybe it's also worth considering, how can I collaborate in a space where money might be involved, right? And then we get to a place where then we flip the switch. Maybe now it's really worth being a cooperative, because this is going to change something. It's not just collaborating with no money, but actually we're doing something differently.
No.
Maybe that shouldn't be the last word. Somebody else should say something.
I quite like it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I think it makes sense for people to sort of, for me, I have a sociology background, so it's about sort of understanding the world around you and figuring out how you can be an actor in that process and not just subjected to like the things that society kind of does to us. And I feel like the cooperative model is a way, that we can build more so in right relationship, like with each other. And yeah, I encourage everyone to do that. I don't think that it gets rid of all of the social ills, but I feel like it's a step in the right direction. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Then do we have more questions?
No.
No. No more questions for tonight. It's been a lot of food for thought to digest. I would like to hereby thank all of you for joining us today on the panel. I think, it makes my heart sing when I can see that we are together, creating something beautiful, even though we are in different countries, in different, music scene, wherever. We are doing the same thing and we are on the same path, and it's really beautiful for me to see. So thank you very much. And I hope we have started a conversation that will continue. And thanks for all those who watched us on YouTube. If this cause is important to you, if you want to create a change, be the change, then please follow Resonate. Go to resonate.es, listen to music on Resonate, and support Care of Editions, and also Feel Conspiracy. You can subscribe to our mailing list also on feelconspiracy.com and follow us on Facebook. And we will definitely, after this conversation, post some links for further reading and tools for creating your new alternative social experiment in music industry. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.